It really looks like we're seeing liberal globalism collapse literally everywhere. I mean, we saw it implode in real time in Davos last week. We're seeing it defeated slowly but surely on the streets of Minneapolis. And now we're seeing the final pillar of the New World Order crumble in Brussels as Europe discovers the horrifying truth. When you spend everything on ideology and bureaucracy, but nothing on power, you end up dismissed, disregarded, and humiliatingly ignored. Hey gang, it's me, Dr. Steve, your Patriot Professor, celebrating yet another day in Trump's golden age that you made possible back in November 2024. So if you want a front row seat on how you continue to change the world in ways you never even imagined, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. One quick programming note, because of all the snow we got here on the East Coast, we've moved our Lancaster Academy of the Performing Arts event to next Monday, February 2nd at 7 p.m. We already had a packed house that signed up for yesterday, but with all the snow, we're moving it to next Monday. So I hope to see some of you there. Click on the link in the description for more details. As the liberal international order was being dismantled in Davos last week, Trump envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner met with Russian President Vladimir Putin for 4 hours at the Kremlin to discuss conditions for ending the Ukraine war. The meeting was preparatory for delegations from Russia, Ukraine, and the United States convening in Abu Dhabi just days later, representing the first official trilateral discussions between Russia, Ukraine, and the United States. One of the more prominent attendees was Kirill Dmitriev, CEO of Russia's Sovereign Wealth Fund and Putin's investment envoy. Reports are that they're looking for ways to create very constructive economic ventures between Russia and the United States, which, of course, is key to Trump's realignment of the world. He wants the conflicts to end and the commerce to begin. And he believes that the key to a lasting peace anywhere in the world is mutually beneficial business relations, like turning Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East or the mineral deal in Ukraine. But that said, even more noticeable was who wasn't there. Not a single representative or delegation from the European Union. The European political establishment has been completely shut out of these talks, internationally sidelined, consigned to total irrelevance. While the real powers sat down to decide Ukraine's future, Brussels wasn't even invited to the table. The European Union just got kicked out of the very room it helped to build. Now, make no mistake, this is the moment when years of liberal globalist fantasy crashed into the reality of hard power. The moment when regulatory superpowers discovered that rules don't win wars. The moment when Europe learned that funding a conflict doesn't guarantee controlling the peace. I mean, just the other day, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov, to put it mildly, he didn't use diplomatic niceties. He called EU leadership semi-literate, incompetent functionaries who cannot grasp basic geopolitical reality. And then he issued what amounts to basically a diplomatic death sentence. He chided their chief negotiator, Kaja Kallas, the EU's High Representative for Foreign Affairs. Peskov said that Moscow would never have anything to do with her. She will not be part of any negotiations, and they plan to proceed with her and without her, and by implication, without the whole of the EU completely shut out of any and all discussions. Now, this, of course, is in response to Kallas being a radical, pro-Ukraine, anti-Russian hawk. She demanded more weapons for Ukraine. She demanded together tougher sanctions on Russia, zero territorial compromise, zero. She's demanding literally every inch of land that Russia's conquered returned to Ukraine, even Crimea. She said that under no circumstance will the EU ever recognize Crimea as part of Russia. Now, that might sound principled in Brussels faculty clubs. It sounds like absolute delusion to anyone actually negotiating the world of great power politics. Russia sees her as an ideological enemy, not a negotiator. And to make things even worse, she's facing dissension from within the European Union itself. Hungary and Slovakia, EU member states, are openly rebelling. Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico compared the entire European Union to a massage parlor. Lots of talk, no results. And that their ideologically rigid demands are a non-starter. He's demanding Kallas actually step down. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has publicly accused Brussels of pushing Europe towards endless war with no exit strategy. And across the continent, war fatigue is exploding. Economically, politically, they're calling it EU fatigue. More and more Europeans have had it with these feckless bureaucrats who seem to live in their own world, spending other people's money, thinking that they can regulate every aspect of domestic and international life according to their own managerial protocols. And then when they find out that they can't, they double down on it all. And they basically huff and puff and insist things have to go their way, or heaven forbid, they're gonna have to form another committee meeting. I mean, it's just so patently embarrassing. It's exactly what we saw play out with Greenland. I mean, when President Trump said that America needs Greenland for its new security architecture and the changing geopolitical chessboard, he was mocked. He was ridiculed by these very same bureaucrats who chastised him for even suggesting that Greenland, an island with 60,000 people on it, could ever be anything other than Danish. I mean, again, it was so surreal. I mean, listening to these people they literally live in a different era. They've completely lost the plot. They're so soaked in liberal globalist ideology, they're not recognizing that a completely new world is rising. The European Union funded a war they could no longer control. They supported a diplomat nobody respects, and they push an ideology nobody outside of their limited sphere believes in anymore. And now they're sitting in the waiting room while the adults make the actual decisions. But here's what most people don't realize. This geopolitical collapse has massive consequences actually for your personal financial future. Gang, I mean, we're approaching a moment in the markets that very few people are actually prepared for. I mean, we're seeing rising debt, stubborn inflation, elevated interest rates, and growing global instability all at the same time. And history shows that when these forces converge, markets don't behave as most investors expect. The era of easy money and passive investing is changing. What's replacing it is volatility, and volatility changes everything. That's why I want to personally invite you to a free live training class with someone I absolutely trust, and that's the amazing investor and entrepreneur, Ryan Kwasson. Now, for years, Ryan has been teaching everyday Americans, many of them complete beginners, how to navigate volatile markets using clear, common sense approaches to trading stocks and options. And in this live class, Ryan's going to teach you a simple, I want to underscore that, simple, repeatable framework for identifying low risk, high reward trade opportunities, including straightforward option strategies that are working right now in 2026. This isn't theory. These are practical principles working right now in real market conditions. What impresses me most and what really sets Ryan's work apart is that it's grounded in first principles. They focus on understanding market structure, managing risk, and letting probabilities work in your favor rather than, guessing, predicting, or reacting emotionally to headlines. If you're thinking, I've never traded before, I don't have the time or the background for something so complicated, this training was designed specifically for you. It's all about clarity, not complexity. And here's the key point. The people who thrive keep things simple, repeatable, and easy to implement in any market environment. If you want to understand how disciplined traders are positioning themselves for this next phase of the economy, I strongly encourage you to reserve your spot right now. Go to biz.com/Turley. Spots are limited to keep it focused and interactive. So if this resonates with you, I would not wait. You need to click on that link below right now. If you're new to trading or if you felt confused by today's markets, this live class was built to give you clarity in a time of uncertainty. Click on that link below right now. What we're witnessing isn't just a diplomatic snub. This is the return of what scholars call great power politics. And European leaders, unfortunately, have just been left completely behind. The liberal international order that dominated geopolitics from 1991 to roughly 2022 is dead. I mean, even liberal globalists are themselves admitting that. That world where multilateral institutions, international law, transatlantic consensus that supposedly govern global affairs, that world is, even now as we speak, being replaced by something very different. A civilizationalist world order where only a handful of nations govern their respective geographic and culturally bound spheres. It's being widely recognized that the world is basically being carved up among four great powers: Russia, China, India, and the United States. Russia governs its Eurasian sphere of influence: Belarus, Eastern Ukraine, Georgia, Armenia, all the Stan countries. China governs its Sinosphere, Mongolia, down to Southeast Asia, Laos, Vietnam, Singapore, Thailand. India governs its Indosphere, Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, the Maldives. And of course, the United States governs its Western Hemisphere, right? The Caribbean, Latin America, and yes, Greenland. And yes, we even throw Canada in there as well. And given that this emerging civilizational map, here's the reality the bullies in Brussels refuse to accept. The conflict between Russia and Ukraine will ultimately be decided by who? Who's going to resolve it? It's going to be Russia and the United States as two of the four great powers in a multipolar world. It's simply not going to be decided by an increasingly irrelevant liberal managerial relic like the European Union. Europe no longer has any relevance in diplomatic affairs, at least at this magnitude. They built their entire post-Cold War identity on the assumption that soft power, regulations, economic influence, protocol could replace hard power. They were catastrophically wrong. In the emerging multipolar world, what matters is military capability, nuclear deterrence, economic self-sufficiency, and civilizational dynamics and cultural commonality that extend beyond the nation state. Europe has unfortunately delegated military security to us, America, for 70 years, hemorrhaged industrial capacity to China, regulated themselves into economic stagnation, and built a foreign policy based entirely on lecturing others about human rights. And the result? When the United States and Russia sit down to negotiate the future of Eastern Europe, Brussels gets a courtesy call at best. Not because Trump is being mean or Putin is being vindictive, but because great powers negotiate with other great powers. And unfortunately, Europe simply isn't a great power anymore. They're a regulatory zone with delusions of grandeur. I mean, think about what this means going forward. Every major geopolitical question, Taiwan, the Middle East, Central Asia, even European security itself, will be decided by conversations between Washington, Moscow, Beijing, and potentially New Delhi. Brussels will read about the outcomes in the newspaper. That's not pessimism. That's just recognizing the world as it actually exists in 2026. The era of pretending Europe matters diplomatically is over. And bureaucrats like Kaja Kallas just became the face of that humiliating reality.